Howdy, folks, and welcome to a very special holiday episode. You're listening to Fireside Friday, a Sound Appraiser exclusive. My name's Cary Nightingale, and with me as always is my little brother, Kevin Nebrich. In honor of 2020 finally coming to a close, Kev and I decided to write some songs using what we've learned this year in our tune scoring process. Let's light this match. Now, Kevin, you're the better storyteller, so please spin us a yarn about the song you wrote and the demo you recorded.
So the working title for my song is Self-Sabotage. In this track, I welcome the listener in with an arpeggiated intro, changing the pace with an intricate strumming pattern on the guitar, and I make an attempt to tell a tight, 3-act narrative through the voice of a divorcee desperately trying to prevent his past self from completing his time-traveling machine. That should be easy, right? Along the way, I made an effort to evoke a different emotion from the disparate instrumental sections, starting from a place of contentment and calm, moving to one of distress or danger, and adding a triumphant arc before fading out to an uncertain end with our intro arpeggio. Cary, give me a listen. Let me know what you think. And tell me what you think I should focus on to make this song work.
I'd be happy to. Give me just a moment and I'll be right back. And I'm back. Sorry if that took a little bit longer than usual.
Yeah, where'd you go? What happened?
Oh, I had trouble finding the flux capacitor in my Chrysler Sabbath.
I think you got to pay extra for that.
The dealer told me it was fully loaded. But anyway, as to your song, Kev, thank you so much for the opportunity to listen to it. Thank you for writing it and recording it in such a short span of time. I know that when we issued this challenge to each other, we didn't give a very lengthy deadline. And thank you also for telling us what it was about, because just listening to the lyrics, it all sounded pretty, but I didn't get the time traveler part of the story. It was very obviously 3 people being discussed, the narrator and then a he and a she, but it wasn't entirely obvious to me that the narrator was also the he, but from a different era. And I also don't know anything about time travel, so I'm a little confused.
Neither do I, which makes sense.
But overall, I would say that is a strong start to your song. It's obviously a demo, being just sort of a quick live recording of your acoustic guitar and your vocals. But I think if you punch up the lyrics a little bit, you could really have a tight, thought-provoking story on your hands there. And I also want to compliment your guitar playing and the way that you incorporate, I'm guessing that's probably an open tuning to bring a lot of richness to the chords that you're playing. And that ascending piece that you play in the middle, chef's kiss.
Thank you very much.
Now, my demo is going to sound a little bit different, because rather than going for a very live feel, I just programmed everything. The song I wrote is called Cherry Pie Coolin. The lyrics of Cherry Pie Coolin feature a complex rhyme scheme in the verses leading up to the hook and fairly sophisticated word choices to present poetic imagery more than a concrete story. Themes of security, support, and comfort abound throughout. These are privileges enjoyed by the aristocratic class. Whether Cherry Pie Coolin is a celebration of that lifestyle or an indictment of it remains up to the listener. The generally sweet melody and choice to harmonize over the Lydian mode, the most cheerful of modes, would hint toward celebration. The inclusion of many minor and half-diminished chords, along with some sad brass in the bridge, would skew toward indictment. The relaxed rhythm sits mechanically at 82 beats per minute in common time, while still offering some interest in the off-kilter arpeggiated shuffle at times. There's no hiding the fact that the vocal performance in this demo is unprofessional at best, unlistenable at worst. The wide melodic range forces the singer to strain at both the top and bottom. Breath control and pitch precision are both sorely lacking. Timing is generally on, however, and the rawness of the vocals does give fairly passionate feel. The production of this track is adequate given that it's a demo. Aside from the obvious lack of a professional or competent vocalist, the sound would benefit from authentic instruments played by flesh and blood human beings. That said, care was taken to keep the programmed electronic instruments within their appropriate ranges for an overall arrangement that fills a broad spectrum of frequencies. Appeal is incredibly difficult to judge for a demo, especially one that I made myself. But I can say that repeat listenability is very high based on the tune not getting stale to me despite upwards of 60 playthroughs while creating and mixing and making minor adjustments. I obviously love the imagery of the lyrics, the harmonization of the melody, and the ambiguity of the message. Perhaps it's my delusion, but I think a professional studio or even live version of Cherry Pie Coolin could be appealing to the right audience. I rated my own song at 7.5 on the tune score scale, but Kev, I'd love for you to give it a spin and then just lay some feedback on me.
I'm genuinely very excited, sir. Let's do this. Okay, I'm back.
So, Kev, what'd you think?
Very well done, sir. I think melodically, this may be your best work yet. I especially dig the musical interlude around the 2-minute mark. And I have to say that I've really enjoyed hearing you grow compositionally over the last few months and with every intermission track that you create for this show.
Wow, thank you. And I agree, it is my best melodic work because it's the only melody that I've actually consciously written out.
You did a fine job. I do have one note.
Yes.
Rhythmically, you've got a lot going on in your instrumentation, but I think it would be nice to have a stronger presence from the percussion section to just really help tie everything together.
That's good feedback. I can do that for demo version 2.
Awesome.
Now, I have to imagine, Kev, based on the two very different styles of output that we have for this little challenge, that we each approached the challenge in very different ways. And I think it may be helpful for both of us and maybe even both of our listeners to explore our differing approaches in a fireside chat. But that'll have to wait. It's time for a short break. This one's brought to you by Unrealized Potential. Because I hate to break it to you, but your parents are going to die someday. Do you really want the cause to be disappointment? We'll be right back. Howdy, folks, and welcome back. As promised, it's time for a little fireside chat. First off, Kev, I'd love to hear about your approach to writing a song in a very limited span of time.
Well, my approach for this song was the same approach I've always used. I'll usually start by forming a unique instrumental melody and chord progression, and then I'll tie in a bridge and a chorus, hopefully. And once I have what I feel to be a complete structure, I'll attempt to find a good story to tell, focusing on having strong lyrics at appropriate times, and just filling in the blanks until I hopefully have a pretty puzzled together story. Sometimes the result is like a still life, and sometimes it's a bit more abstract. Either way, I know that it can be an effective process, but I still have some streamlining to do. What approach did you take for this one?
Well, I have to say, the approach that you just described is pretty close to my usual approach. Playing around on the guitar, coming up with something that I think sounds good, and then building off of that. But I did something much different because, as I mentioned, this is the first time I've ever written a vocal melody. In this case, I started with the idea for the hook. I had just had that phrase, cherry pie Coolin on the windowsill, written down for months. Who knows where I got it from, and damned if I know what I was going to do with it. But I had it written down. So once we had the challenge, and I was looking through some of my old notes, my old scraps and fragments, I found that, decided I wanted to work that out. So I worked out the melody, the rough melody for that phrase, then started mapping out the imagery and feelings that I wanted to try to evoke in my listener, particularly those themes of security, support, and comfort that I had in the three respective verses. So I tried working those verse lyrics out as much as I could. I then worked out that hook melody note for note, and then the general melodic movement for the verses so that I could pin down how to work it into the Lydian mode, since I've always ignored Lydian for being far too happy sounding, but that's really what I wanted for this song. And after that, it was a matter of working out the overall song structure, where does section A go, where does section B go, and then how to connect them using that intro cadence I'd come up with. And then I did a chord chart for each section. After that, it was mostly just a matter of deciding how to arrange the different instruments around the chord voicings and the instrumental breaks. I will say I did have to rewrite large swaths of the lyrics because a lot of parts of the first draft just didn't fit around the final instrumental or convey my message as intended. And then I had a very long day of learning how to sing, laying down a couple of vocal tracks, and working out a final demo mix with those 40 to 60 playthroughs of the song. So long story short, I started with the melody this time.
The end result was really interesting.
Well, thank you. So like I mentioned, I started with the melody, and that was a different thing that I wanted to try. And it is based on some of the lessons that we've learned throughout the tune scoring process. But Kev, what lessons did you learn that you tried to incorporate into your demo?
Well, the one thing that I can say that I intentionally tried to incorporate into my song was paying special attention to the emotion conveyed in each section of my song. That I've heard time and again from some of our songs that we've listened to with higher tune scores, at least from me. But what about you?
I started out with a brief list of about 4 things that I've learned time and time again. 1, don't piss off headphone users by having really shrill sounds in only one ear and having an awkward mix and things like that. And I did have to deal with that with the trumpet part that I wrote for the bridge, because it gets up there, it gets pretty high. So I had to be careful not to go too high that it sounded shrill, too far over to the side. And when it was getting high, reduce the intensity or the volume of those specific notes just a little bit. The second one was have an intended message in your lyrics, which I kind of did, and it was ambiguous. Celebrate the rich or eat the rich, I guess, would be that message. The third one was don't just use the same 4-chord loop for the whole thing, because that can become a little bit boring or a little bit tiresome. And I think I went to the far end of the spectrum and used just about every chord in F Lydian and then some variations that don't exist. I stepped out of key just a little bit. And the fourth one was to try to make the listener feel something, which I think was your number 1, but it's my number 4. Go figure. And that was where I was trying to get emotionally manipulative with some of the chord voicings and chord changes in addition to the lyrics. But I have to tell you, this whole thing was just a massive pain in the ass to do. Why was that, Kev?
Well, for me, I think I know what a great composition should sound like after doing this with you for quite some time. But the road to get there is still a little bumpy. I need to refine my songwriting process. One of the things that I did, we talked about intentional things that we incorporated. I think one of the unintentional things I did while I was writing my song that I haven't done previously was that I, after having critically listened to so many songs, I tried to do the same thing throughout my process. So when I had a good melody, I listened to it, thought about it. Is this a strong melody? Does it need something different? Does it need something else? And so that kind of slowed me down a bit, I think. But in the end, I think that compositionally, I think most of my song is a little bit stronger than works I've done in the past. So I think it was helpful. But I have to streamline my process, make it a little bit faster. What about you?
Well, I can agree with that about streamlining a process, especially when you're trying something new or really trying to incorporate new rules or new lessons into it. That's a big lesson for all of us. For me, honestly, I think it was just painful or maybe drainful. I do feel drained of energy after going through this. It's because I wasn't necessarily inspired. It wasn't a creative spark. It was a challenge, a gentleman's agreement, if either of us could be called that, to sit down and write songs incorporating these lessons for the purpose of this episode. And that's something that I really admire about you. I think that you have a much more artistic creativity to you. And that's illustrated by your conceptualization of different song ideas that you could write about. The way that you go about writing your songs, I feel like my approach is much more scientific. I have something and then I build on that, and then I build on that, and then I harmonize it this way. And it just doesn't feel as creatively fulfilling to me, I suppose.
It's funny you should say that, because I think that, a lot of times it'll be work. And I think that's the thing that we forget is that creativity doesn't just come out of nowhere. Sometimes it does, but not often. It's so infrequent. By putting in the work and just really, coming up with new melodies, coming up with new story ideas, new lyrics for those story ideas, I think you jar something loose sometimes, and when an idea is right. Sometimes it takes a lot more work to get to that point. Consistency, I would say, is probably key. We could probably be a little more consistent in how often and how much we write.
Oh, I think we're very consistent. One song every 2 years. It's perfect. So, Kev, I suppose the final big topic that we should tackle is about inspiration. What can you do when inspiration feels like it's left you and it ain't coming back?
That's an excellent question. I don't have a great answer for you. Do you have something that you want to throw out there?
Well, the best thing that I could think of to do was really bully myself into mapping out the different thoughts, feelings, evocations associated with that one line that I had, that hook line of cherry pie Coolin on the windowsill. Everything associated with that. And I started seeing Norman Rockwell paintings that don't exist in my mind. And I got myself a whiteboard for Christmas, but it hadn't arrived by the time I was really in these early stages. But otherwise, I would probably whiteboard out a lot of this mind mapping rather than just doing it in my head.
Yeah, I love that. Get it out of your head, get it on as, something that you can visually assess and try to work with it, kind of like putting a puzzle together. Yeah, I like that. I would say that one of the things that I do that seems to work for whatever reason, I think of, just my past. I go through emotional times and I figure out what happened there. What was happening? Who were the characters involved? And I try to work through my past trauma and try to get it on paper, get it out of me, use it to my advantage to tell an interesting story with interesting characters. It's a lot cheaper than therapy.
Words to live by, Kev.
We should also probably tell people to do seek therapy if you need it. Don't avoid going to the doctor.
Also, I suppose, words to live by.
Yeah.
Now, as always, we invite and encourage you to give a listen to the tracks we reviewed today, even though they are rough demos and they're ours. It's a little shameless self-promotion. They're on our Tune Scored Tracks playlist on our YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel and leave us a comment letting us know what you thought of our scores, critiques, and Fireside chat. If you're an up-and-coming songwriter, that's also a great place to recommend one of your songs for a tune score and some good old-fashioned, honest feedback. We'd love to hear from you. We've had a lot of fun today, and we hope you did too. That's been Kevin Nebrich. I've been Cary Nightingale. Wishing you a Happy New Year. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay sound.